comes from the Arizona Inn, a four-diamond, family-owned historic resort hotel and restaurant on Elm Street near the U of A. Information is at arizonainn.com.
Hello everyone, I'm Tucson Weekly editor Jim Ninsel, and we're here to talk Zona Politics. We're joined today by Pima County Supervisor Ramon Valadez from District 2, which includes the south side of the Tucson metro area and Sahuarita. Ramon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for the invitation, Jim.
So, the county recently passed a hands-free ordinance that allows sheriffs to pull people over if they see someone using their cell phone. You voted against this. Why?
Well, I had a number of issues. First of all, I had an issue with it being a primary because, frankly, if you take a look at District 2, we have some affluent areas, but we have a lot of areas that aren't affluent, that have a lot of older cars that don't have Bluetooth in them. And when I talked to the proponents of the issue, one of my concerns was, what are you going to do for people who don't have Bluetooth in their car? Are you going to help them purchase Bluetooth? What are you going to do? And I brought that issue to them. I even mentioned it during the meeting where we adopted it, and it was never addressed. What I saw was a lot of folks from the foothills, from Oro Valley, none of which have that issue, who weren't very concerned about that issue. And that was a very big concern to me. I also talked a little bit about racial profiling, but really social economic profiling. Again, related to the very same issue, who are you going to pull over knowing that they don't have Bluetooth? Are you going to pull over the Lexus or the 2000 Ford that doesn't have a Bluetooth? I mean, there's a lot of potential, and since that time, I've also had a discussion with the sheriff and some of the chiefs about how they're going to enforce it going forward.
Speaking of the sheriff, he recently said that he would not be, he didn't want to put his deputies in the job of enforcing federal immigration laws. It's upset some people in the community that he said that that's the job of the Border Patrol, but he's concerned about maintaining a relationship with the immigrant community so they feel safe about coming forward to report themselves as victims of crime or as witnesses to crime. And he just doesn't have the resources to be in the job of capturing illegal immigrants for the federal government. Your thoughts on what the sheriff has said there?
Well, the sheriff has actually been very consistent on his position, and he's been very communicative with the board on that issue because it's something that we've expressed an interest in. If you take a look at where the Border Patrol and those law enforcement assets are deployed, those aren't really areas we want our taxpayer-paid vehicles going on. They're going to be worn out before their mileage is up, to be honest. These are very rough areas. Plus, you've got to look at the job. The job of Border Patrol is to protect the border. Their job is to make sure that people don't get in and out across the border. The job of the sheriff is law enforcement in the local communities and public safety. Those tend to be very mutually exclusive positions. If you're already alienating part of a community you're supposed to be protecting, how in the world are you going to protect them, and why are they going to talk to you? So I agree with Mark, and I'm very glad that he's thought this position out, and it has the position he has.
Now, the county's aerospace corridor, this is a project they've been working on in the Raytheon area with the change in the road out there in the Raytheon area, which is paid off with a lot more jobs coming here from Raytheon, 2,000 new jobs. But you do have a controversial project out there, which is the Worldview headquarters. This is the high-altitude balloon company that's working on contracts with folks who need a low-cost alternative to satellites, but also space tourism. And your thoughts, you've been sued by the Goldwater Institute saying that you guys came up with a illegal leasing deal with the Worldview people, and your thoughts about, number one, why you went with that deal, and number two, the chances of your lawsuit. You've appealed that lawsuit.
Well, it's a much more complicated issue, and I will tell you that it's very interesting, if not compromising, that the Goldwater didn't file a lawsuit at the 7 instances in Maricopa County that did the exact same thing with the exact same piece of law, and it wasn't until Pima County did it that they chose to sue. Very different story than what we normally hear. The overall lawsuit, they had several counts. They won on one count, and so we've appealed that one count. The truth is that there's people trying to make a less than factual argument about it, and simply saying that we violated the law. Well, the truth is we didn't violate the law. There's two sections of law. One says you can do it, one says you can't, which is why we have a court of appeals, because they decide questions of law like that. That's what they're set up for. And the truth is, they'll decide whether or not it's legal or illegal.
And in terms of the aerospace corridor, what are you hoping to see out there in the future?
Well, I'll tell you what, we've thankfully, that was a vision we had a while back, and what happened is that originally we didn't have the relationship before that we today have as a county with Raytheon. We didn't talk to each other, we couldn't talk to each other. And then we discovered that they had an issue, and that issue was that the old Hughes Access Road, they needed to make sure and get Department of Defense waivers in order to be able to continue to operate there, simply because the explosion circle intersected Hughes Access Road. So we figured out a plan to get it out of that circle and to use that property once we acquired it for a very similar kind of facility that Huntsville, Alabama uses theirs. They've had tremendous success, and because we lost those several hundred jobs to Huntsville, and then we went out there and found out what they were doing so successfully, and now we're duplicating that. We've seen the growth at Raytheon, we've seen Worldview go there, we've seen Vector go there, and we've had a lot of interest. And truthfully, that is one of our premier projects in terms of economic development in our region.
Let's shift gears a little bit to the animal care issue. You guys did persuade voters to build you a new animal care center, and the county has been moving a lot further away from euthanization of the dogs and adopting them out, and cats and other animals that you take in over there. But there's been an additional cost that's come along with that, and some of the local communities, as you've tried to pass those costs on to them, have balked. The city of Marana has said that they are going to start their own dog catching unit, and they're going to work with the Humane Society and leave the county behind. And I've heard some talk that maybe Sahuarita is going to follow in their footsteps. And are you concerned about losing these other communities and their support of this project? And did the county go too far in raising the cost to them?
Well, I'll tell you what. Part of what we sold when we did the bond in 2014 for the Animal Care Center was that we said, okay, we want to change, and we were very vocal about it with our voters. We said, we're going to change the philosophy. In the past, we have euthanized what we feel are way too many animals. We're going to try to get as close to a no-kill shelter as we can. And we've gone from euthanizing a very high percentage of animals to adopting well over 90% of them. You know, is there a cost associated with that? Sure. The average stay before an animal generally gets adopted after he or she comes into the center is about 11 days. And part of the controversy has been, frankly, the law only requires 5 days. But the truth is, it's a little bit like the RTA, which I know we're going to be talking about. We made a commitment to voters, and we have to honor it.
And are you concerned these other communities may follow Marana's footsteps?
You know, that's a decision that each community has to make. Obviously, you know, Marana did it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, earlier this week, Sahuarita did make that vote. That's a decision each community needs to make. They believed originally that obviously there were going to be a cost savings to them. We don't believe that there's going to be a cost savings to them, frankly, because we think it's going to be more expensive, but that's for them to decide.
You mentioned again the RTA just a moment ago, and the roads are certainly a huge complaint in our community. Obviously, there's a big bill on deferred maintenance and repairing our roads. Where do we go from here in terms of repairing these roads, and what do you see as the future? Does the Regional Transportation Authority play a role in that down the road?
It can. I will tell you that right now the need for pavement preservation is huge. When we originally did the RTA in 2006, and as you recall, we had preparing for that election, we had over 250 public hearings led by the Citizens Committee that put together the plan that we did. And at that point in time, pavement preservation wasn't even brought up. It wasn't even top 10 priority. Today, that's changed. Any road package that we put together has got to deal with transportation, which is why, if you recall, when we considered the 2015 bond election, From the dais, I added $160 million for pavement preservation in that bond. Ultimately, that failed, but the truth is the need is great. The RTA going forward in a potential reauthorization is likely to consider a big portion of those monies going to pavement preservation. Because if you recall, that need is probably somewhere, for the region, is probably somewhere between $800 million and $1 billion in order to bring all roads in our community to a minimum standard. So the solution needs to be regional. We've reached out at every level to the federal government. We've reached out to the state government. Obviously, there was some discussion during the state legislative session this time. It didn't go anywhere. Obviously, they did finally bring it to a discussion. We hope that someday that bears fruit. But the truth is, in the time since 1991-92, when the gas tax was last raised, the pot has stayed the same. And then they've dipped into it, and so we get less road money, same amount of roads. It buys less than half of what it used to, plus it's diverted to fund DPS and for a while MVD, and that really wasn't the purpose for the gas tax.
What about the idea of using county general tax dollars for road maintenance? That's come up. You do spend, I think, about $5 million a year on that.
Not anymore.
Oh, not even doing that. So folks are saying, why don't you just go ahead and spend the money from your general fund?
I will tell you that we did it for 2 years. And I had some issues with doing it, and so did, I believe, Supervisor Elias. And the reason we had an issue is because 88% of the population of District 2 lives within Tucson, South Tucson, and Sahuarita. 88%, and it can only go to areas outside of those incorporated areas. So they're all paying into the pot, but they don't see any direct benefit. What I had insisted on when we first did it, and it was part of the motion that was later ignored by one of my colleagues, was that money had to go to major regional thoroughfares, because I can talk to any constituent and then say, wait, why'd you do that? Well, you know what? It's going to regional thoroughfares that we all use. Oh, okay. I can defend that. But when it goes to neighborhood roads that only small pockets of the population use, but we're all paying into it, it's very difficult to justify that. Which is when I did the bond amendment, what I did is I said, look, it's got to be able to be spent in incorporated areas as well.
All right. Supervisor Valadez, we're going to have to leave it there because we are out of time, but thank you so much for stopping by the set here on Zona Politics.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate the invitation. Look forward to the next time.
All right. And we will be right back with Andy Slavitt, a former healthcare industry executive who was acting administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services from 2015 to 2017. Stay tuned.
Zona Politics is made possible with the generous support of the Loft Cinema, Tucson's independent movie theater. The Loft features independent foreign and documentary films, cult classics, discussions with filmmakers, and much more, including the Loft Film Fest in November. The Loft is located at 3233 East Speedway Boulevard. Showtimes can be found at loftcinema.org. Support for Zona Politics is provided by Hotel Congress in historic downtown Tucson. More information at hotelcongress.com and 622-8848. The Tucson Hispanic Chamber of Commerce serves the business community in the bilingual, bicultural region of the Arizona-Sonora border and is a proud media partner with Zona Politics. Learn more at TucsonHispanicChamber.org.
Yes. The restaurant called St. Augustine.
Oh, St. Augustine.
All of these young people from the community come together, actually get up and do something.
We can do anything!
I think we've attracted a lot of people that are super passionate.
We're here at the No Ban, No Law protest.
If you come out of college, you have this experience, you know how things run, you have a huge leg up.
People who have ideas and who are dreamers, you know what I mean, who really want to get themselves out there. I think that they should come here.
And we're back with Zona Politics. Joining me now is Andy Slavitt, a former healthcare executive who was acting administrator for the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services from 2015 to 2017. Mr. Slavitt, thanks so much for joining us here on Zona Politics.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
So you've been quite critical of the healthcare plan passed by Republicans in the House of Representatives. Why did you think it was a bad plan?
Well, quite frankly, it's just half-baked. I mean, it is a bill that has a number of problems with it. It sets the country back. According to nonpartisan estimates, 24 million people would be losing coverage. Medicaid and Medicaid expansion, which has been so important here in Arizona, would be rolled back, which hurts kids and it hurts people in nursing homes. It hurts people with disabilities. And then even further now, people would lose some of the important protections that they've gained over the last few years. Protections against being discriminated or charged more because they have a pre-existing illness. That's a problem.
You mentioned the Medicaid expansion here, and here in Arizona, the Republican state lawmakers have tried to come up with requirements to go along with participation in that program, 5-year time limit or co-pays or things like that. Are those reasonable approaches to the idea of state innovation in this program?
Look, I'm sympathetic to Governor Ducey and his team being able to make sure that Medicaid is right for the state of Arizona. And Arizona's always had, I think, been a bit of a leader in Medicaid and in covering folks. Would I agree with every decision that Governor Ducey and his team would make? No. I think that we are at a place in our country where people should be able to count on health care and view it as a right instead of viewing the emergency room as the option they take after they've been sick for a long, long time. I want to live in a country, and I think we all want to live in a country where when your kid is sick, you're not afraid to take them to the doctor because you can't afford it. That's good for people. It's also good financially because that means that we don't end up with the very long hospital stays because people have ignored their illnesses.
And you also mentioned the pre-existing conditions and what's in this legislation. Republicans are saying, well, that's been mischaracterized. You'd only lose your protection for a year or something along those lines. And I want to ask you if you want to address what your concerns are with how this bill has been written.
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the website of the GOP House, the day after they took the vote, they removed a sentence which they'd always had on the website, which said that they believe that people shouldn't be charged more for pre-existing conditions. That came down right after the vote. I think that tells you that they know that this is a federal protection that's being eliminated. And that's something that they wanted to do or felt like they needed to do in order to get votes from the conservative wing of the party. It's not something that I think they wanted to do out of the gate. But we can't be at a place where we have to win at all costs. And I worry that in the haste for Trump to demonstrate that he can pass something, he's willing to take a win at all costs and even tell himself that it's not as bad as it really is. But out in the real world, and the people I hear from every day, people who have sick kids, people who have kids with chronic conditions, this would be a devastating change for them.
And in terms of the high-risk pools, because some folks are saying, well, we'll set up high-risk pools, and that's where folks with the pre-existing conditions can go. Well, where is the problem with these high-risk pools?
Yeah. We shouldn't get confused by language, and I think, I've yet to hear someone who supports high-risk pools really explain to people why it's acceptable and why it's better for them to be in a pool with only sick people that is funded separately from everything else and doesn't allow them to get access to the same care. And if you ask a politician, would you like to be in a high-risk pool? I don't think you get a lot of people saying yes. So it's not a right case to make. I think the good news is there are other answers. And I wouldn't be here to tell you that the ACA doesn't have challenges that need to be worked on. Of course it does. If we had the kind of cooperation that the American people expect, there are solutions. There are surgical solutions. High-risk pools isn't a very good one, though.
Was there enough funding in this bill for the high-risk pools if indeed a state went to them?
Well, there's over 100 million Americans that have pre-existing conditions, and the funding that was added at the last minute to the bill would cover an estimated 70,000, and not at the same level of benefits that people are used to today. So it's inadequate. I think it's a show vote. I think it's something that causes me to say the American public needs to be paying attention.
And there's also a limit on how much insurance companies can charge older Americans. They can charge them 3 times as much as younger Americans at this point, but the bill expands that to 5 times as much. And you have concerns about that.
Well, it's what the AARP calls an age tax. And the age tax essentially says that insurance companies will now be able to charge people who are my age and older, I don't think I'm that old, 5 times what they charge younger people. That's extraordinarily big difference, and it's compounded by the fact that for most people they'll get a lower tax credit than they would under the ACA. So, insurance that you can't afford isn't really insurance at all. That's why the estimates are 24 million people lose coverage. It's not because coverage won't be available, it's because it won't be available to everybody and it won't be affordable to everybody.
And obviously, when the ACA passed, not every state bought into being on part of the Medicaid expansion. How much did that affect the coverage that was available to Americans and the expansion of coverage under the ACA?
It's a really big deal, and it's a great question because if you were to imagine that every state expanded Medicaid, as was the design of the law, if there hadn't been a Supreme Court case, there'd be a couple of important differences. First of all, 3 million more people would be covered today. Secondly, in those states that have high premiums, their premiums would be an estimated 7% lower, because when you include everybody in the pool, the costs go down for everybody. So a lot of the complaints that you hear from Republicans about how the ACA doesn't work ring a little bit hollow. They ring, quite frankly, a little bit false, because they're decisions that they made to keep people uncovered that are driving up the costs.
And you stepped into running the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid after the rollout of the original individual, the healthcare exchanges online, and there were a few bugs.
Right.
There were a few problems. And you came in, and you took over, smoothed a lot of that out, and we're running it from that point forward. And you mentioned that there were some changes that needed to be made to reform Obamacare to make it work better, the Affordable Care Act to make it work better. Talk a little bit about what you think those would have been.
Sure. Well, look, I'm a private sector person. I've been in healthcare my whole career. I've spent my life trying to help people get access to better quality care. So I'm also a believer that the laws we have, the policies we have as a country are all about how well we come together and make them work. And so when we had the situation where the website didn't work, I left my job, went to DC, and was there until it got turned around and stayed as part of the administration to help make sure we executed and delivered what the American people deserve. If that same spirit had been in Congress, if the Republicans and Democrats had said, you know what, we didn't all vote for this, it maybe wouldn't have been our first choice for how the law should work, but we're going to pull together and make it work, and when we see things that aren't working, we're going to fix them, we'd be in a completely different world. And the world that we would have been in is a world where we wouldn't have had $8 billion stripped out of the law to drive rates up. So today, I think restoring what should have been in the law, expanding Medicaid in these other states, having reinsurance that gets into can be executed at a state-by-state level, are things that we need to do to add the competition to the market that we need.
And we have Republican lawmakers like Southern Arizona's Martha McSally, the congresswoman here, who say the Affordable Care Act is collapsing. It's a disaster, and we've seen insurance companies leaving the exchanges, including here in Arizona. Your thoughts on why that's going on, and is it collapsing?
Sure. Well, with all due respect, Congressman McSally doesn't know what she's talking about. The law, for the most part, the most important part of the law has been the expanded coverage through Medicaid. That has worked very successfully here in Arizona. It's worked very successfully all over the country. That would be ended by the vote that Representative McSally made. So let's be very, very clear about that. Secondly, we did have challenges here in the state in Phoenix last year, and I know because I came down here and sent my team down here. We were in the middle of an election. There were companies that had been losing money, and we had a challenging situation. But you know what? That situation got repaired and can get further repaired if like-minded people get together and do the things that'll add competition, add a little more of the subsidies back into the program. And today, the insurance companies are eager to expand, but what's happened is that the president has said that he's not going to enforce the law, he's not going to enforce the individual mandate, he's not going to make the payments that insurance companies are due, and so he is making the law collapse. And that's a form of bad faith sabotage that I think people need to be called to question. So Representative McSally, if she's willing to join me tomorrow as I go down to Sierra Vista, we can have this conversation live in front of her constituents.
In terms of how the Medicare situation would change, basically the funding would be frozen, and you'd have, if I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the funding would be frozen and changed to a per capita basis, if I understand things correctly. Yeah, on Medicaid. So yes. Can you kind of explain what that means to the average Medicaid recipient?
Sure. Well, let's talk about what the Medicaid program is, because I think most people don't understand. Half the kids in our country today are born in the Medicaid program. And if you think about what it means to get the right start, to have fewer unwanted pregnancies, to have kids born full term, healthy nutrition, that's what the Medicaid program does. Second thing the Medicaid program does is it pays for half of the long-term care that we have in this country. So if you want to spend your waning days in a retirement home that's paid for, we need the Medicaid program. So what's done here is the Medicaid program, according to this bill, would cut the Medicaid program by 25%, which means billions of dollars would stop coming to Arizona. And then it would be capped. And by capped, that means that the federal government would fix their commitment of how much money they would fund the state of Arizona from then on, and which means that the burden of taking care of people would shift to the state. And that's a very hard burden for most states, including Arizona.
Yeah, we haven't seen Arizona lawmakers be particularly generous when it comes to Medicare without the federal matching funds. So I think that's definitely a problem.
State budgets are challenging, and this is an important role the federal government has always played. States have always been able to count on the federal government to provide their share, and if it goes away, the impact on real people will be disastrous.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank Andy Slavitt, the former head of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, for coming in and talking to us about what the impacts of the changes to the health care law. That is our show for today. My thanks to our media partners at Tucson Weekly, Tucson Local Media, and Community Radio, KXCI 91.3 FM, where our radio version of Zona Politics airs Sunday afternoons at 5 p.m. My thanks also to the gang here at Creative Tucson who make Zona Politics possible. If you want to check out the show online, you can find us at zonapolitics.com and creativetucson.org. Be sure to follow us on Facebook. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Zona Politics is hosted by Tucson Weekly senior writer Jim Ninsel. The program is produced by Jennifer Powers Murphy and Danny Vinnick and edited by Jim Rundle. Special thanks to KXCI, Tucson Weekly, Brink Creative Digital, and all supporters who provide crucial funding for the program. Learn more about Zona Politics at zonapolitics.com and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter